Greetings. This video I'm recording just to show off a new solo guide for my Traveler campaign. So it's a new kind of solo system. It's RPG. It's system agnostic. Um, but I'm wrestling with it now. It came out within the last few weeks, I think. Um, and it actually is a second edition of something else I had before, the Mythic Game Master Emulator, which was pretty good. The first edition just to me seemed a bit scattered. Didn't have as much structure. But whoever did it went back and redid it, added more, structured it better, etc. And so the purpose of this is to, be a game master emulator, or I'm doing my solo traveler campaign, and I can go to the guidelines, charts, tables, but now structure of this system to basically run the campaign, answer questions, set up scenes, etc. So I just wanted to review this. This is what I'm trying to hopefully incorporate here going forward as the main solo guide for my campaign. Um, and I've used some other tools. Zozers was a big one. Zozers Solar Camp, specifically for Traveler and the open source CVS version, which I've reviewed in another video. But it's good because it gives specific solo campaign guidelines for Traveler systems, for like scouts is what I'm using, naval, traders, etc. So the charts and tables are aimed at that. So that's been helpful, and I've been using that initially to start it. Of course, if you're following my campaign, you did see how it's kind of taken on a life of its own, and I've pulled in advanced resources for world and system building, empire building, now starship ops, and I'm thinking of doing another video soon where I just kind of now review my growing list of resources. But this kind of really interested me. I picked it up. It was getting good reviews, good videos, and I thought, well, I'll take a look at it. I have the first edition. And then I read it and I said, now this could work. This is building structure, a little more structure into the solo campaign. And as an example, if you know Drive-Thru RPG, the website, currently as of today, which is 1/27/2023, it's their #1 seller, and I would expect that. But let's go ahead and take a look at this. Create dynamic role-playing adventures without a game master. That's the goal here. And this, of course, is the second edition. Copyright's probably 2022. Got some interesting graphics here. Got the intro. Here's the table of contents. This is a good place to start. This talks about first kind of an overview of what we're going to dive deeper into here. Big part is fate questions. Basically, during your campaign, you ask questions, and then there's charts, tables, processes. Does this room have enemies, or does this system have another alien, or and that's a key, asking good questions. But then you use their process or table to decide yes or no, really yes, really no, etc. There's a chaos factor they introduce to kind of tweak that response. Then you've got the other big one is random events. You got to have a way to generate random events, and you've seen that through a bunch of other solo campaign tools that they can do that. When are they triggered? What are the topics? What do they apply to, etc. Now, and this is the one I'm interested. This is new to me. Scenes. You break up your campaign into scenes, and then there's structure within those scenes on how to run the campaign based on what your goals are, NPCs, player characters, what's going on. That's the lists there. And that they've got a whole section there. I mean, these are the big three. And this is good. The fate questions are good. They flesh it out more. Random events gives that more fleshing out. But this is the scenes concept is what really interests me here. And their concept here is you can run it against any RPG. In theory, using these rules, you can just run a whole solo campaign using this solo guide by just asking questions and setting up scenes, etc. But in my case, yeah, I want to use this just to guide my Traveler, but then when I get into the specifics, Traveler has rules for that, and ideally, combat or etc. So it's going to be a combo of kind of using this for the solo structure and determining questions and relying on Traveler Cephas. I'll say those two interchangeable. The rule systems are similar. Because in a previous review, I just reviewed the latest Cephas version, came out, the Lux edition, and it's got a bunch of good stuff in it too. So, these are the big three areas. Then they have a variations where, you know, you're not stuck with this. They give you all sorts of other options to kind of, you know, tweak or modify what's set out here in the basic concepts. So there's a lot of material here. And there's a lot of tables, and that's what solo RPG people want. Lots of tables to figure out what's going on next. And you do see examples here, fate, etc. And intertwined, the author does at the end of each chapter do an example. Here it is, big scene example, guardian here, random event example, fate question example, and then I think they tie it all up in a big example of everything in progress. And then they give you a rule summary, which would be helpful. Looks kind of like a sequence of play for you wargamers out there, but it's not as structured, obviously. And then we have lots and lots of charts, and we'll look at those. So let's go ahead. Yeah, that's a good sign. That's a sci-fi picture, so that'll help my sci-fi RPG. And like I said, this is the overview. How you could use this solo role play is what we're using it for. What I'm using it for. You could use it for group role play, and you don't have a GM. This system actually acts as a GM. And then the players kind of cooperate, maybe have a main guide, etc. Or you could use it to help GMing, build out prep for a GM session. And then they say you could even use it to write a novel. Kind of what I'm doing on the blog site, although that's not my intent. Guidelines for if you're doing a group. Fate questions now, the key thing here. Fate questions are the core. You can ask Mythic anything, and it's a yes/no. Is the room occupied? Does the alien attack? Do you find it's... And this is where, of course, you know, they're not giving you the fake question. You have to come up with the questions appropriate for the campaign, the situation, the players, etc. And that in itself is a skill. But then you use the system here to answer it. And in general, you're using a 1d100 on a chart, combining it with a chaos factor, and it's yes, really yes, or no, really no. And then you have to interpret it. Okay. Chaos factor is kind of ramping up the tension, lowering the tension. You can use this to kind of set that. And that's kind of controlled by what the characters do. They basically say, if the players are in control of that last scene situation, then we decrease the chaos factor. But if the characters weren't really in control, you increase the chaos factor. And we'll see on the chart that pushes the questions more towards, you know, depending on if you're asking yes questions. Makes things more chaotic. That's the intent. Then they talk about what's changed from the previous one. We won't talk about that, but here. And this again is a summary chapter. Random events. These get generated, potentially, as you're asking questions. I think the rule is if you get doubles on 2, 1d10. As you're moving between scenes, you can potentially get random events. And then you can just leverage random events to spice up the campaign. Just do it. You know, just say, let's do a random event. Make things happen. And then scenes. This is the one that really interests me. This kind of gives structure. You divide up your campaign into different scenes. And then you play out the scene. And when you come into the scene, there's some things you determine. When you leave the scene, there's some things that can potentially train. Okay? This is the one I really am interested in applying. And it gives structure too. You make lists of who your characters are and what your purposes are, and random events are rolled against them, and it kind of, you know, helps. And then you just break it up into scenes, and you can record each scene. So you end up also building an account of your campaign. So I'm really interested. Scene is up to you, but it's just like in a movie. Discrete portion of your adventure encapsulates an important moment or event. or you're searching through a cave, or in our case, our current crew has finished on the cube. Now that could have been a scene where they went on the cube and met the aliens, had first contact, and then it ended, the scene ended with them being dismissed. And I may use that as my exiting scene and apply the exiting rules to try out these rules first. And then the next scene would potentially be, and there's even, when you go to the next scene, you say, this is probably what the next scene is, but I'm going to roll some dice based on the chaos factor. Wait, no, it's slightly modified, or wait, no, something entirely different happens. So that gets you some good randomization. But the next scene could be them going to the ship and potentially leaving the system, maybe not getting all the way to the 200 diameter limit for the jump. But I can say the next scene is getting on the system and trying to getting on the ship and trying to get out of the system, and then I play that out. And then that's done. Record stuff that applies, and say, okay, the next scene is them transiting to the, and then I play that out. So you're getting these bite-sized chunks. And I kind of like that idea. I kind of was doing that, so. And then there's a whole bunch, yeah, we're maintaining lists. We'll see that later, non-player characters, threads. Threads are, I think this was in Starforge too, purposes, you know, like I could say, at this point I'd say a thread for my crew is to jump back to the scout base, you know, and then what you can do is you can apply random elements, and you have to decide, do they apply against players, NPCs, could be threads, purposes, etc. So threads are like meanings. I'm still grappling with that one. I mean, threads are like goals, okay? Or my scout team is, one of my threads is survey the planet. You know, if they jump to a new system, and it's like one of the threads now is survey this planet. And then stuff can happen around that. And then there's a whole bunch of meaning tables. We're going to get a yes-no. Meaning tables are used by random events, basically 2 words. Is this person hostile? They could go to the meaning tables to determine how they react, and they get the words rune and mundane. Then you got to beat your head against it to interpret it. And this one says you encounter this NPC vandalizing a building. That's interesting. So there's all sorts of tables. And again, these roles for meaning can be applied, you know, random events, between scenes, anytime. Don't overuse them, obviously. Expectations, and I did find some terms here. Game master list, yeah, we talked through all those. And it's kind of like your expectations during, now it's not like you're totally abandoning any idea what's going to happen and saying, this will figure it out, because this is RPG agnostic. It's not for your situation. So you have to kind of apply it to your situation, respond to a given situation. And that, of course, makes sense. Solo examples, interpretation, putting it all together, and this can be Game Master for pretty much any RPG. So it just takes place of the Game Master. So let's see, we are at 13. Yeah, we'll do a little more real quick here. These flowcharts are nice. It's kind of common sense, but here's your key thing, and you're going to see this in a lot of solo systems. Ask a question. They call it a fate question. Test a fate question. Moment of narrative tension when you're unsure of what will happen next. Like I was doing when they met the aliens. I set up a question of how do they respond? Specific questions, you know, or what's their mood, etc. And we rolled on that. Luckily, it came out as they weren't too interested, brushed them off, and moved on, as opposed to, okay, we're going to hold you hostage and put you in a cell. But that was a possibility, and that's a question you have to ask. So, should this expectation be tested? No, we know it's going to happen. I mean, do they make it through the airlock into the ship? I mean, yeah. Okay, I'm not going to roll a fate question on that. No, they don't. So what happens? You know, they get crushed between the ship. I'm just making this up, but you know, so there are some expectations you just assume will happen, like the team is going to be able to leave the cube and get in the ship. But then there are some stuff of, you know, one of the questions I want to ask, because the aliens made an illusion that we have notified our naval forces. is, are there naval forces hiding in the system? And then that could be its own separate encounter. So that could be something to put into a fake question. And then I could use the fake questions to say, how do they respond? What do they do here? Or I could look at my other sources specifically for ship encounters, which Traveler has, and some, I think, Zoser, and decide maybe to roll against that table instead. Fine, total flexibility here. But the initial question could be just posed as a fake question. And whenever you ask a fake question, then you say, you're going to see the chart, you're going to say, is it 50-50? Is it likely? Is it unlikely? Is it very unlikely? Is it very likely? And that changes the odds. Okay, roll the dice and interpret the results, and then continue. The challenge, the process is straightforward. The challenge is asking good questions and good idea on the odds, and not overdoing it. They recommend no more than 2 for any situation. They give an example, and then you could have action-oriented questions or not. We're assuming that, and that's why when the chaos factor goes up, you get more yeses. Okay. And again, this is arbitrary. What's the question and what are the odds? But again, you've got context. So this is just a guide to roll. And here's a table here. I'm just looking at 50-50. This is basically saying you start at chaos factor 5, which is kind of neutral. And if we do 50-50, there you go. If you roll a 1 to 50, it's a yes. If you roll a 51 to 100, it's a no. Now these are for exceptional yes, they call it. If you roll a 10 or less, it's not just yes, it's really yes. Or if you roll a 91 or higher, it's really no. And that guides your interpretation. But then you also see the chaos factor then shifts the odds. And remember, as players get more control, the odds go down. But interestingly enough, the answer to the questions are probably going to be no. See how the odds go down for a yes? It's got to think about that dynamic. They mention it in the rules. They note it. See how that plays out. And as things become more chaotic, there's more likelihood your fate questions are going to be yeses. So you could cheat and say, do they get away safely? Oh, yes. No. But then I'd have to take the chaos factor down because they controlled. So I have to think about this, that interrelationship here with the chaos factor. How much control the player characters have over current events. Yeah. And then they kind of give a nice description of, here are the odds you may pick. I think that matches here. Yeah, let's say unlikely, very unlikely, nearly impossible, impossible. Well, you roll a 1, okay, we'll let you do it. Chaos 1. Well, here it's a 10 on a standard chaos, so even impossible stuff can happen. Okay. But then they give you example odds and questions. Certainty. You're as sure as you can be. Its intent was to destroy, and it's really going to do it. Is the creature hostile? Yeah, it's already communicated that. Will this abandoned car start? It was driven here just a moment ago. Probably. Certainly, he was driving. So you get the idea. And then impossible. These creatures have always been peaceful. They're not going to be hostile. The thing is a wreck. It would be a miracle if it started, or he's a true believer in our enemy. This is just example here. And they do give flavors here. I think there's another example of this table later as a variation where you can strip it down to not as many as these, 4 different choices. But that's your choice. At the start of a new adventure, chaos factor set to 5. A scene that was chaotic just happened and out of control increases the chaos factor by 1. Well, a scene where the player characters are mostly in control decreased by 1. So if I look at that encounter they had in my campaign with the aliens, it looked obviously the players weren't in control. The aliens were. Basically said, this is our property, get the heck out of here. Come back in 3 weeks if you're interested. So I would consider maybe increasing the chaos factor. But, that's... And there's even a rule in the variations to just somewhat randomize this based on a die roll, which I kind of am drawn to. And there's that summary of chaos factor. Higher values, etc. And so I guess they're saying it kind of counterbalances as you move towards more yes answers, and they Maybe they put some more in control and more no answers. We'll see. Again, this is a dynamic I have to think about. And you can always arbitrarily change anything. Let's see. Okay. And then they talk about, here are the 4 answers, like I explained. The answer is the opposite of yes. The answer is yes. The answer is yes, and expectation and beyond. So your question is an expectation and beyond. And there are the numbers I mentioned. So they're doing a good job of explaining this. Here's an alternate way. If you don't want to use a fate chart, you can skip the chart and use a fate check. And then it's just kind of more like the skills rolls, you know, in Traveler. See if it's got, here's your modifiers and get above this. Maybe. I'll look at that. Random events, it occurs if you do a fate question and you get doubles on the 2 1d10s. And the value is within the chaos range factor. So if chaos is 5 and I roll double 4s, 4 is under 5, it's a random event. But if I roll double 6s, it's above the chaos factor, and therefore there isn't a random event. So that's one case a random event can occur. You can see we can roll them out multiple times here. Try and link yourself to no more than 2 fate questions for any one detail. Yeah, don't overkill. You could even use it, that's what I go to, that you could even use this rule set as its own RPG just by asking questions including the result. You know, do we win the combat? And then we just basically say likely, unlikely, and then roll a die. Well, I'd rather play out the combat, but you could do that. So, and they say you can also do that, like if you're running a campaign and you forgot that rule and you don't want to take the time to look it up, just turn it into a fate question. That's handy, although I think in my case I'm probably not going to be doing that. Yeah, here it is. Fate questions is RPG rules. And guidelines. Pose the fate question to act as the RPG rule. Value of 5 for these questions. That's interesting. Yeah, if you're doing RPG rules, just assume chaos factor of 5. Treat yes and no as regular. If the rules use degrees of success or failure. Ignore random events unless they make sense. So even if you got doubles. Yep, you can do that. And then they got examples, and here's a big example for that one. Of a campaign. I don't know, let's look at the campaign they pick. Alright, I'm at 22, I don't want to go beyond 33. In this example, the player character is Henny Lassiter, a barista turned zombie apocalypse survivor. Yep, I'll be playing that one soon. Don't hold your breath. Henry's player is using their favorite end-of-the-world RPG with Mythic as the game master. Yep, so again, that's the point. Any RPG, or let Mythic run it based on rules as questions. And then they give you an example. That looks dangerous. Random events is the next one. So we talked about fate questions. Big component, and you'll see this in other solo systems. Ask a question, go to the system for an answer. Although your question has to make sense, appropriate context, and then you give it odds, and this thing introduces a chaos factor, and then you have to interpret the results. And again, a fate question can generate a random event. Yeah. Okay, and basically generate random events, consider the context, determine the event focus. Now this is cool. This is actually something, before you figure out what the random event is, you actually determine what the focus is, and that's based on a list. Is it focused on a player character? Bob. Is it focused on a non-player character? The alien. You can even put in your list, is it focused on the ship? You could roll for your ship, get 2 answers, and it may be a malfunction or something wrong with the ship. Okay, you know, and this is what you put in a list. You're going to see later. Every scene you start, you put in your list. These are the things that, amongst other things, a random event could occur against. So this is pretty cool. So first thing you determine is we got a random event, but what's the focus of it? Could be a person, place, or thing, right? depending on what you decide to put in your list, and the context, always the context. So you got the focus, yeah, and they mentioned that. Let's consider the context. All right, in that context, of all the things there, people, objects, whatever, what could be a focus, and then randomize that, then get in a random meaning, and there's so many meaning tables. Pick one that applies, and then interpret the results. Pretty cool. Here's a random event focus. Yeah, I'm sorry, this is an actual table. Ooh. And they explain all these. This is cool. New non-player character. Or an existing non-player, and now you got to roll against your non-player characters to figure out which one. So you got to figure out if I've got more than one non-player character, now they're going to do something negative, something positive. Those threads, those purposes of your goal. Let's say my goal is to leave the system. I get a random event, and I find it's moving away from a thread. That means something's going to impede me from doing that. Okay, I kind of got that much. Then I go to the meaning tables, the appropriate ones, and roll for 2 descriptive words or actions or whatever, you'll see, and then I try and do a context there. So again, the players, this is not totally spelling it out. It's not like those focused solo rule set like Zoser is, or Mongoose Traveler gives me a starship encounter specific, what's the starship reaction, and it's somewhat focused to that. This is a little broader, and you got to figure it out, but this is pretty cool for the random event here. And then they kind of spend a little time explaining each one. A new NPC player, non-player character, an NPC. Roll on the character list to see which NPC it is. There's your list I talked about. Zombie apocalypse survivor trying to find antibiotics, and then they give you an example. Then it's negative or positive. I have no idea what it could be. Ask a question. Yeah, and if it doesn't make sense in the context, you can go to a question here. Moving towards a thread, something pursuit, a goal of the scene or the entire campaign. And you update these lists between scenes. Move away, it represents a new hurdle or setback. Actually finishes the scene, got to think about that. Current context. And if you have a good idea of what the event focus should be, you can choose that result instead of rolling. Okay, and that's a case where just based on the context, I know it's going to apply to this. So you got that flexibility. Event focus may make, when choosing it may make, yeah, and again, if you want to choose it, here's a summary of them. So you can go and choose it instead of trying to randomize it. Whatever makes sense, okay? And then we've got these lists that we're going to check against. And notice we basically got 2 lists. Thread lists, threads, that's your purposes, and characters. And these are the ones. Amongst other things, we go to randomize, and they even give you ways to roll against these to figure who it applies to. And you'll notice in the character list, this is interesting. It's not just characters, even though they name it. Here we have Tubi, I guess, and Bertha. And they even mention possible characters. You're in the jungle, so some random event may apply to something with the jungle. Or there's dinosaurs in the jungle, so we get a random event and it's dinosaurs. Or there's a volcano in the jungle, or there's a lizard man. Or so you see with this list, I'm just populating focuses, possible focuses for random events. And then here you see the goals. Get off the island. Find missing crew. Find a mystical stone. So these are all kind of pursuits in the scene or in the campaign. And again, those random events could apply against them. So, and then they give the rules here on how to roll to get those pretty good. And then they, of course, give you an example list. I think what you do is you roll for the, I think if you get an empty one, you just roll again. So, like this one, I'd have to roll to see is it this list or this list. And then, depending on what list it is, then I roll within the list. Okay. So, rolls a D4, right? Because I've only got 1 through 4 here. And then that brings me to this list, and then I probably need to roll a D4 again, because all the results go 1, 2, 3, 4. But if I had here, I could probably roll a D8. You can get dice rollers to, you don't necessarily have to have that physical dice. You can just go on the internet and see me use a dice roller. And then here's a blank one. So I'm going to be dumping these out. And you pretty much populate these in between scenes because stuff changes. Pretty cool. Event meaning, that's the big one now. We've got the focus. Generate the event meaning, rolling 1d100 twice on an event meaning table to get 2 words. Okay. And meaning tables come in 3 general varieties. The meaning table could be words related to actions, words related to descriptions, or words related to elements, and you have to figure out what's appropriate based on the context. Choose an element, select an element, record an element makes sense, and choose to roll again. If you would rather be surprised, then roll again until you get an active element on the list. Okay. I mean, it's your campaign, you're in control. And here they give you example ones, but the back of the book has so many more. And again, you get, okay, I got action 1 table, and I rolled delay, protect. Okay, the action is let's say this group is delaying us to protect another group. Okay, so you see how you're getting an idea of what it is. Increase, recruit. Okay, well, you just went to a recruiting office. You know, celebrate, trust. The natives trust you, and they're having a party. Okay. I'm just shooting from the hip. You get a bit more thought, but here's another. So I think this is, I think we do. You roll on this one first, and then you roll on that one. So this is the actions one. Relinquish pain. Oof. I have some ideas on that, but I'll save that. And then here's a descriptor. Let's say you're looking at something, you're trying to figure out what it is, or a character. Enthusiastically heavy, or I don't know, enthusiastically healthy. Okay, you're at a gym. Neatly military. Okay. I'm just, arbitrarily picking stuff here. But again, you use those to try. And of course, if the answer you get, you just can't figure it out, roll it again. And here's elements. This is more interesting. Maybe a location we need somewhere in it, or something about a character. That became our focus. On an object we're looking at. Here's some ones for that. And this is just, like I said, there's a whole bunch more of these tables in the back. But these then generate meaning here. Yeah, if you get the same word twice, double down. Yeah, they give an example here. And then interpreting the event. Event focus tells you what aspect of the event you're going to turn your attention to. Meaning gives you details. Context gives you background. Put those 3 together and interpret. Just as your expectations guide your fate questions, they also guide your interpretation. And then they give you examples. I'm going to try and play this out. Going forward in my campaign, you can do another meaning roll to see what additional information, additional words would give. And they give you some nice examples here. Player character is a vampire cruising a nightclub. Okay. Triumphant friend. Human is sitting alone. Perfect time to approach, but then his friends arrive. Oops. Old West gambler. Smuggler piloting your ship through space when you get stopped by an Imperial cruiser. And event focus move towards it. The threat is deliver the rebel commander to her secret base. So you rolled and the focus is on this. Attain business. While you scramble for a lie to tell them over comms, the rebel commander hands you a code, valid shipping license, send it, and they are like, oh, okay. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Yeah, so there's some creativeness in this interpretation here. And then they give you a big example. All right, we're at 34. I'm going to do this last one, and then we'll call it. Like I said, I'm looking forward to applying this. This is the one that's new. This is the one that I'm most excited about. The other one fleshes out, reinforces stuff I'm kind of familiar with, I've been doing, but this concept of breaking you up into scenes. Scene structure, mostly there to help you keep track of where your adventure is going, less likely to get lost in the weeds. Yeah, instead of a continuous, then I did this, then I did this. No. I'm going to say, I can arbitrarily say the next scene is exiting the star system, notice, and then stuff can happen in there. I play it out, you know, I ask fake questions appropriately, maybe random events, and then the end of the scene is, okay, all of that's done, I've exited the star system, I'm moving into the next scene, in my mind, which would be the trip for however long to the 200 diameter jump limit, and then play that out and see what happens. And the scene is over, move on to the next scene. Common element to scenes are those lists, right? Threads, adventure goals, characters, things to interact with. The way you want the scene structure, beginning and the end, I just said that. And then, this is interesting, expected scenes, altered scenes, and interrupted scenes. So what happens is, I've finished my encounter with the aliens, and it's time to go leave the system. So my expected scene is, basically, we get on the ship and leave the system. But you're going to roll, I think, against the chaos factor, and it's possible you may get an altered scene, meaning that expectation isn't right. You can pick a focus, and it tweaks the scene, something different, or something totally interrupts it. And then you're in a random event kind of thing and saying, okay, my next scene is not what I expected. It's not slightly altered, it's totally, and now for something completely different. And I have to go let the system help me figure out what that interrupt is. So this is pretty cool here in my mind, going between scenes, okay? And then bookkeeping. This is your bookkeeping point too. You record your scenes. Record what happens. And like for me, I'm blogging some narrative out. This is great too because I do the scene, I record what happens, and I've kind of already been doing this, not as structured. And then I take the time to sit down and kind of write a quick few paragraphs on what actually happened and put it on the blog site. So what lists do you need? First step, elements of the scene. Create a list. And again, we did see the lists, the thread lists, the character lists, etc. And you see the example here. The character is a fantasy adventure, court intrigue. Thinking about this for us here. Coming to the table with a few ideas. Put in a couple NPCs. King Ramfrey, royal family, castle staff. Player also has a goal, survive court politics. That's on the threads. And this gets the ball rolling. And then as you go through each scene, you're adding, subtracting from the thread and the character list. The threads list goals, character list various NPCs. Then they talk about it some more. Important part of your likely be a random event. Yeah, anything on these lists potentially become a random event too. Player characters and non-player characters for the scene. You could also include groups in your character list. Like they said, the servants. You don't say servant A, servant B, servant B. You don't necessarily have to generate an NPC for each servant, but you could say the servants as a group. So when a random event occurs, it says it's somehow related to the servants. Or the dinosaurs, they say. It could be an object. See, here's an example of a starship. It could break. Think about that. And then anything else that you think maybe a random event could go against. In the end, deciding what should be an active element in your adventure comes down to expectations and desires. Yours. Lists are updated during the bookkeeping phase at the end of a scene. Yeah, move stuff out. In my case, in the previous scene, the aliens, the NPC aliens, and I could have put one each, were in my character list. But now that we're going into the scene of leaving the system, they may still be in it in case they interact with us. But if I get out of the system and then head to the jump point, then maybe those particular aliens drop off my list. And the whole scene purpose was leave the system. You know, maybe I wouldn't pick that as a thread. Maybe the thread should be, the goal should be jump back to the main base. And so leaving the system is part of that. That's step one. Getting 200 diameters, that's step two. And you'll see with threads we track our steps. So again, it's all up to you here. Here are the four types of, well, the first scene for your campaign. I'm way past that. And then at the end of one scene, you define your expected next scene, and then you roll against chaos to determine if it is what you expected. If it's altered scene, you make a difference to the same expected scene, or totally something else happens. And then they're talking about the first event, how to get that start. Didn't have that problem with mine, but they give you all sorts of guidelines how to start that first scene. Who, what, where, why, interpret the results, etc. They give you examples, but then expected scenes when a scene comes to an end. First thing you do before beginning the next one is decide how you think it'll start. Usually based on what you want your PC to do next. This is the expected scene. Then you test it. Roll a d10, compare it to the current chaos factor. If you roll above it, then the expected scene starts exactly how you thought it would. That's interesting. So if it gets more and more chaotic, who knows what the heck's going to happen. If I got a chaos factor of 8 right now, for example, or in our case, it's probably 6. So here we go. Here's a table down here. You roll over the chaos factor. Hey, whatever you said happens, happens. They get in their ship and they leave the system, play it out. Play the scene out. Now, stuff may happen during that scene, but that is what we're doing. If you roll within the chaos factor, if it's an odd number, something's not quite the same, but it's pretty much the same. But if you roll an even number, then you interrupt. Altered scene begins in the next most expected way, as though the Mythic heard your idea, so let's try something else slightly different. Discovering the suspect, wasn't it? So they alter this, saying the detective is going to catch the suspect at work, and the alteration is they get to work, they're not there, they're really at home. Okay, see, that's kind of a tweak. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So you pick something in that expected scene that's not the same. Pick, I don't know how to think. The next expected scene is them starting up the ship and moving to leave the system. Maybe something different happens. The aliens communicate again, or they decide to scan the planetoid belt, or that's a whole nother scene, but I have to wrestle with it. A tweak, a fate question, meaning table, scene adjustment. Oh, that's interesting. Let's see if they take you through that. If you're not quite sure how to alter it, like I was, try a fate question. Okay. And then that fate question, here we are using a meaning table as an inspiration. You can also use it as inspiration for an altered scene. I could do a fate question. I could refer to a meaning table to kind of give me an idea of the tweak. Maybe I could focus it on a character. See how we're kind of reusing that concept here. For a more randomized tweak, wow, you got options. Remove a character, add a character, reduce. Ooh. Okay. Make 2 adjustments. So again, you've got multiple ways to do this altered scene. You could just think of something. You could go to the meanings tables, or you could use this totally random table. And then they explain, add a character. I'm tempted by this one. This one is nice, lots of randomization. Yeah, I'll have to look at that. And then the interrupt scenes, anything can happen. Altered scenes play off your expectations. The interrupt scene just says, best laid plans of mice and men. That's not what you're doing here. Detective PC, death of his client's husband, suspect in the workplace, player rolls, gets a 2. Interrupt. Generate a random event for the interrupt scene. Roll on the event focus table, NPC action, roll on the characters. Look at that. And here we are back again at that random event. So you see it's more than just during the play I generate it from a die roll. Here's my random event occurring because I got an interrupt scene. That's cool. That would be cool. Somebody tries to go on the ship and misses and floats off into space. Oops. Now it's a rescue attempt. Okay. Interrupt scenes disturb the flow of events. But how do you connect the dots? Well, you can do that. So that's pretty cool. I like that system. Then once you've figured out the scene, whether it's expected, altered, or totally, and now for something completely different, then you play it out. Yeah. And let's see. This is talking about Mythic with another RPG. that balance between fate questions and using the RPG systems, like Traveler, I roll a skills check. Do I convince the aliens? Likely, unlikely, or diplomatic skills check with my modifiers. So, yeah, you can do as much as you want there. Then they talk about journaling. That's important. Keeping a record. And your scene. Each scene is your journal. I would say your breakup point. Beginning and ending scenes. Interest. Yeah, and then they even have this. Now, would I use this? I don't know. I'm using OneNote. I'll just make a new page for each scene. I think I've already doing that. But then you can record, what scene number, scene summary, chaos factor, and any other notes. And you do this for each scene. And you have a record. That's pretty cool. Scene start and end strategies. Oh, and then moving on to the next. Now they give you all sorts of. When do I want to define a scene starts and ends? And in my case, it could be linearly location. Once I leave the system, that scene ends. Or it could be entirely there's time or location. It could be a narrative shift. Up until this time, everything's been nice, and I'm in the scene, but then the whole thing changes. Like maybe when I was talking to the aliens, that was a scene, everything was good, but suddenly they became hostile. Poof. Mood change. Poof. End that scene, start a new scene. And then, all the stuff in between it. So this is interesting stuff. The mood changes, narrative shift. I don't know what automatic interrupt is. I'd probably tend towards this initially. But this narrative and mood, I would maybe. And then interest. You just get bored with your campaign, which hopefully I won't do. Narrative shifts. Yep. They give you examples. The mood shifts. We went from friendly diplomatic talking to hostile, they're attacking us. You hit a dead end. You have no idea where to go next or what the expected scene should be. Okay, then we just call the ball. It's an interrupt scene. Random event, meeting table. Yeah, that's if you basically don't know what to do next. You can also skip event and make the focus an automatic move toward a threat. Yeah, that gives you. Let's see. Don't ask too many questions. Yeah, then an example. Here's a player asks 3 fate questions. Overkill on this treasure when they could have probably got away with 1. Yeah. Tension building questions. Okay. Narrative killing questions. Does my character die? Yes. Oh, what game over? I don't think it's that far, but. You can roll on a meeting table anytime you want to know something a yes or no fate question doesn't cover. Cool. And this is where they start mentioning, we saw those meeting tables before, but those are just the core meeting tables. They actually have, oh my goodness, over 45. These are just the element tables. Oh, these are just element tables to choose from, unable to pick or wanting to pick one. They have 45 of them for dungeons, forests, spell effects, spaceships, character-oriented ones. Oh my goodness. Oh, here they all are. Holy smoke. Elements meaning tables at a glance. You could go for army descriptors, cabin descriptors, characters, character appearance, character descriptors, character personality, city descriptors, creature abilities, curses, cryptic messages, gods, legends, locations. Is there anything here about space? Starship descriptors. Okay. Terrain descriptors, undead descriptors, sounds, and all of these are tables. If you know your context and you want a specific meaning table, and they call this elements meaning table, then you can pick one of these to roll on. They're all in the back of the book. Oh, never mind, they're all right here. Yeah, and you see this elements table, adventure tone, aliens, etc. Cavern, characters, and then characters combat. You could even say, do I win the combat? Likely, unlikely. Roll a die? No, they kill me. Or I win, if you don't want to resolve the combat. Or you could do a descriptor against the combat. Character appearance, what they look like. This is all sorts of stuff, cool stuff. Character background, lots of stuff on characters here. Creatures creature abilities. Ooh, that's scary. Although we did see in the Cephas Deluxe rules, you can generate. They actually give you rules to generate animals or creatures. Pretty cool. Starforged gave you some stuff too, more detailed descriptors too. So, again, this is a complementary tool if you want to do it. Curses, etc. Alright, so I'm at 50 minutes. Hold on. Yep, and there's a whole bunch here. And then they kind of spend some time kind of overviewing each of these tables. Okay. And examples, and the two words don't go together. Here's some ideas. Do an and, a but, an of, an ly. Yep. Mutation, noble house. I think they... And NPC behavior. We saw all those tables. Here's a whole separate one for NPC actions. Do you have an idea what the NPC will do? No. Discover meaning with meaning tables. Or yes. Then you're going to end up in a fate question. Do you have a clear idea what the NPC will do and the action is not crucial to the adventure? No. Ask a fate question. Or you have a clear idea and it's not crucial? Just solve it and move on. You know, there's no value in bringing it into a fate question. So these are, I like these are kind of like logic flow charts. What's the NPC going to do? Cool. And let's see, NPC behavior tables. They're tired. And here we are finally at the end of the scene. You've reached the end. I've left the system. Woohoo! Then you look at your tables. Add any threads or NPCs that seem important, or any you've left behind. Take them off. Okay. End of scene bookkeeping. Add list elements. Remove list elements. Adjust the chaos factor. Is it appropriate to adjust the chaos factor? Were they in control? Did the player character mostly control the scene? Yes. Oh, we'd go down one. The chaos factor goes down one. If they weren't in control, it goes up one. Okay. Cleaning up the lists, removing things that don't apply. You could do random chaos. It's to skip this process of asking were they in control. You roll the die. If your roll on 1d10 is equal to the current chaos factor or less, -1. Give it a -1 modifier with a minimum of 1. Oh, okay, this is when you roll the die. And then, so you got a die roll modifier on the die roll, but then you're checking whatever the final roll is against the actual chaos factor. Let's attach the chaos factor from PC actions. Okay. The end of the scene, roll 1d10. If you roll equal to the current chaos factor or less, give it a -1. That's what you do. If you roll the chaos factor or less, you bring it down 1. If you roll more than the chaos factor, you add it more. And notice as it gets higher, it gets harder to keep increasing it. I kind of like this better, to be honest, instead of trying to say. So I'd incorporate that in between scenes. And then they give you a big example of a scene. And they're using their lists and their scene recording. And there you go, that's the end. Now, I'm not going to, this is a whole other ball of wax here, variations. They used to publish that separately, I think in version 1, their variations. But they do give some good ideas on how to get ready for solo. Ooh, this is nice. Linear versus sandbox. Yeah. Is my campaign these events after it, or is it sandbox in the sense that anything can happen? And you saw mine, I think mine is somewhat linear, somewhat sandbox. But that's good stuff. Journaling, recording, novelization, woohoo. And if you break it up in scenes, you can play it anywhere. Yeah, and then they give you some more stuff, which maybe I'll look at in a later video, but I've gone way too long here. They talk about threads in more depth. Yeah, character versus player knowledge. This is good. I'll have to go through this one separately. Yeah, they give you variations on the chaos kind of thing, chaos table. So this is cool. Keyed scenes, I gotta look up what those are. But again, we're in variations. And, ooh, nice. There's a whole bunch of prepared adventures out there, and they tell you how to kind of integrate it with a prepared adventure. So, something to look at later. Yep, scaling of a prepared adventure. Nice. I'm going to click through this. Scenes, adventure, features list. After fending a scene. I'll have to look at that stuff. Testing the scene. Prepared adventure. Oh, this is all about prepared adventure focus table. Nice. That's nice. Any prepared adventure solo. Awesome. Awesome. Good stuff. I was wondering how to incorporate those. And now you know. You can use this for it. Alright, let's see what else we got. Complicated campaigns. The I don't know rule. That's nice. Multiple lists. Yeah, they go into more depth there. Oof, I don't know what peril points are. Save an adventure from an early end. Okay. Oh, and then there's some tool out there you can use. I haven't looked at it. Adventure Crafter. I viewed it as an alternate version of Mythic Game earlier. Yeah, okay, so there's a web page. Web, I guess, based tool. Lists, rolling on a list. Yeah, looks like good stuff. Adventure Crafter deck. And then they got a big example at the end. Alright. Oh, and the rule summary. Good deal. Asking fate questions. The fate chart. Yep. And then there's that fate check. Fate questions is rules, generating random events, rolling on lists, first scene, testing scenes, altered scenes, interrupt scenes. This could be handy to kind of pairs it down here. And to bookkeeping, NPC statistics, thread progress, keyed scenes. You see the variations are here. Peril points. So this is pretty handy. Yep, and here we go. We got, as usual, the journal list. Yeah, and here are the charts. All at the end. I think I'm going to snip these out and put them in my Vassal mod. And then here are the main ones we saw. Actions, no, and here they all are again. Unbelievable. Are they all here again? Wow. This is twice these are in there. These would probably be easier to chip. Yeah, these are the ones I'll use to clip out and put in my Vassal mod. Thread progress track, and that's, talk about that more in another one. Here's some stripped down fate charts, probably from variations, triggers, so it's all here. Pull it out of here. Good stuff, and that's the end. Thank you. Actually, this is pretty good. I am definitely looking forward to leveraging this, so I appreciate anybody who's listened this far. I'm sorry I'm up to 1 hour, but I've also found in many areas of my life, if I have to explain something, it makes me understand it better from reading it. So I'm getting a better idea going through this, talking through it. Yeah, if you are into solo RPG or want to help your GMing, or I think you probably shoot from the hip and do your own role-playing game from the theater of mind, just using this with their random events, questions, scenes, and all that. This is a solid tool, so yeah. I haven't used it yet, but so far, all those glowing reviews, I am in concurrence. So I'm hoping in my next session, with the campaign coming up here next, to incorporate this, put this stuff into action. And the other video in this RPG, my solo campaign, is I have built up a rather large list of resources. I actually had to write them down because I'm losing track. So I may go back just for everybody and review now, beyond just solo campaigning, what are the rule systems I'm using, what are the source books, some other stuff I found that, I'm pulling from to do my campaign. It seems I'm spending more time on my campaign doing that than actually playing it out, but that's okay. Hopefully at the end of the process I'll have built up a good process resources, procedures, etc. And then I can use it to then begin, get it working well and begin using it to just start driving my campaign. And I've built up an environment now where I can also do naval campaign and I can do a trading campaign at the very least. So got a bunch of cool stuff, but this may be, putting it into play. This could be the centerpiece, the umbrella guide on how to do it. Not to say I won't use the other ones where it makes sense, but this concept of scenes, fate questions, and random events makes sense. Alright, well, enough of that. I am literally at 1 hour and 26 seconds. I will stop it here and say thanks for listening. If you made it this far, double thanks. Click like if you liked. Comments are greatly appreciated, and subscribe if you haven't. See you at the next one.